So now I was saying that when we want to look at what happens when our JavaScript file cannot load, we go to our more tools and look for developer tools and make sure that we leave the tab on console, and the error will be displayed here along with the line number where the error happened. If you are using other browsers, you want to look for where developer tools for your browser is located, and it's going to be exactly the same way to get the error message on the console there. So in JavaScript, when we want to write comments, we use // for a single line comment, and anything that comes after this up until the end of the line will be ignored from execution. So let's say I wrote something, for instance, I say x is equal to 5. And I decided that I don't want this to create an error on my page, or I want to test something else. I want to put another x is equal to 10. So let's declare this as a variable. Ignore what I'm doing, and I'm going to show you exactly why. I just want to illustrate this. Because I can't use the let keyword to declare the same variable twice. We can't redeclare the variable. I want to just test different values. I'll put a // here to exempt one of it from execution. And so when we use a // we exempt from execution. Sometimes we want to leave a note beside it and say, this should print out 10. So you leave a note like this, maybe after you put // and at the end of the line, the comment ends. So that's for single line. Let's say what you want to write is a whole lot of text. For JavaScript, we use / and an asterisk, and then we end asterisk and /. And for this, we can write all our text here as long as we want, as long as it's between this start and end. So you can leave comments. Maybe you want to write a note, define something. You want to write the logic, how you were thinking when you wrote the code, because the thing about programming is that sometimes you come back another day and you can't even remember what you did the previous day. So this is the best way. Always comment your code. It's a good programming practice. So at the beginning, you might want to write maybe the author, location, anything you need to write here to leave the code. And for those of you that will make it to internship, which by the way will be opened by the end of this week or next week, we decided to postpone that opening because of the festive season and the fact that we want other course openings to launch at the same time. So just watch out on your emails and you see that. So for those of you that make it to internship and you'll be working on live projects and collaborating with groups, you will need to learn how to use comments like this. So this is how we write comments in JavaScript. We want to display data. We want data to be displayed on the page. And in JavaScript, there are several ways we can do this. I have created 2 paragraphs. And I used the ID attributes and gave this an ID. IDs are unique, as we've learned in part 1. So any HTML element with an ID attribute should be the only HTML element with an ID attribute. Every other ID that has the same name or the same value for the attributes will be ignored. So we have the p tag with ID paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. We want our JavaScript to write to this p tag. There is the inner HTML method that we use to write to the HTML tags. And one of the ways we do this, let's say for instance, I want to declare a variable, or I want to write something and I want that thing printed within the p tag, but I want to use JavaScript to send that to the p tag. So I want to say documents. You always use documents, dot. Now, the name of the function we're using is get element by ID. And then in a pair of parentheses, and in a pair of quotes, you want to write the ID of that element that you want to write to. Let's say paragraph 1. Dot inner HTML. Now, these things are case sensitive, so take note of the case. Get element is one element, so it's singular by ID. When we start doing something like get elements by class name, you see it to be plural because many elements have the class. Okay, so once we get .inner HTML, what do we want to write to that? We terminate each line of the JavaScript code with a semicolon like this. So within the code, we're going to write something that we want to display. Let's say I want to write the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Okay, let's say I also have, for instance, a heading. Now say ID is equal to heading 1. Now close page 1. Now, what I'll do here is to say the first thing I want to do is to put a heading to this document. So I'll say document dot get element by ID heading 1 dot inner HTML. Inner HTML should be your friend when we start doing data analysis, because every time we want to write to the HTML or we want to plot our charts and we want to leave labels or something, we're going to be using inner HTML to do that. So you want to be able to practice this and master how to write to HTML documents in JavaScript. So the inner HTML here, we want to write introduction to JavaScript like this. So we'll save this, and when I refresh my page, I have the heading H1, Introduction to JavaScript, and then the first paragraph, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. So we've written to our tags, and we've used JavaScript to write to our tag. So one of the methods of writing is inner HTML. We have other methods that we use. Let's say, for instance, I want to insert a document into a database, and I'm using jQuery, one of JavaScript library, and I want it to alert the user to say, are you ready to confirm, or something like that. And most of you would have seen that when you try to submit your assignment, they ask you for confirmation, you click OK, submit. We do that with window.alert. You can either write window.alert like this, or you just write alert without the window. Either way will work. What do we want to alert to the user? This is the end of the document. So there's going to be a different order where this will be executed. So I will show you that when I finish typing on the page. So when I refresh my page here now, I'll have the alert come out first before any other thing is printed to the tags. The alert is the first thing that will be responded to. Click OK, and the others will be displayed. I can write using something like console.log. So this is also for debugging. So sometimes when we don't have any error handling and we want the console to tell us exactly what is going on, we can write this is used for debugging. When I save this and I refresh, we won't see anything printed about this, but when we go to our console, more tools, developer tools, go to console, we'll find that's written there. So every time you want to handle error, one way is to use console.log to say, okay, for each of the users, or when you are developing, during your phase of development, you want to always send to the console to make sure that everything is okay, or to use it to debug. But you don't use this for production because it's not, you don't debug in production. Right? So when you want to do something like, for more debugging too, we can use something like window.write. Window documents.write. So write it like this, documents.write. And this, let's say for instance, we want to write the sum of 5 plus 5. And then when we save this and we refresh, we'll have the sum 5 plus 5, 10. So these are the different ways we write to script. We'll learn more ways, get elements by class name and all the others later on when we look at the DOM in detail. But when we want to write to the page, these are an example of how to write to HTML tags. We can print the screen by using window.print. And so this will print the current window. And so when I save this and refresh, after the alert, I get the print that will tell me what I want to print. It redirects to my printer, and if I click print, it's going to print. I won't print because I don't want to print anything else. And that's how you print. So if you have your system attached to a printer, you get that page printed out. Okay? Any question before I go further? Okay, so now yeah, sorry.
Yes, I wanted to ask this.
Okay.
The scripts. What is the best way to go? Is it like putting it in the head elements or the body elements? Which one is the preferred method to use?
Putting it the last thing before the body, even if it's an external script file, the last before you close body tab is usually the best. That's where you're going to avoid any error or any unforeseen circumstances. Because if you put it at the head, sometimes the script needs to see the elements before the script. And so in the event we take this script above here, nothing is going to print to the page. And the reason is it's not aware of what is in the body. So it does not know that there's a heading 1, any element with an heading 1 or heading 2 below it. So it's going to have a blank here because it's not finding all of these elements. So the elements have to exist, and the script will only have, so let's make it in layman's language, the script will only look up to see if there's anything like that above it, but it doesn't look down to see if there's anything below it. So I'll put it here. But in some cases, you leave it in the head elements, that when you're connecting to CDN, you leave in the head, and sometimes it works, sometimes it's unexpected. So I just recommend you always put it as the last thing before the close body tab. That way you avoid problems.
Right, thank you.
Okay. So we have something we call variables. And for those of you whose first programming language is JavaScript, variables are like containers that we use to store values. I want to always use my name, maybe in sentences on the page. And I don't want to have to type my name all the time. I want to call a variable that holds my name. And this will be more useful when we start storing arrays, like we want to list all of the people in the class. And we use an array to list everybody in the class, or an object to list everybody in the class and different properties of the people in the class. It will now be easier to just call that object and get the key, or call the array and get the value out of it. In JavaScript, we declare variables in different ways. Before 2015, there was a var keyword, which was very liberal. You could declare var x is equal to 5. And throughout the document knows what x is. The value is 5. Anywhere you put x, it replaces x with 5. So if you use var keyword to declare variables, you want to support other browsers, but it's recommended you use only the let keyword or the const for constant. We use the const keyword when the value is not expected to change. For instance, we want to say we are defining pi, and we know that the value of pi is always constant, to be 3.14. Or want to define the constant, something like not pi, maybe Euler's constant, and we know the value of that to be 2 point something, and we'll put the constant values there. Now, what makes let and const different, we're going to discuss as we go along. But for now, when you want to declare a variable, you either use var to support other browsers, or you use let. When we want to write a variable, we give it an identifier, which is a name, which must be unique. That name is case sensitive. That name must not start with a number. You can start with an underscore, you can start with any letter of the alphabet, or you can start with a $sign. But you cannot start the name of a variable with a number. Okay? Within the name, you can have the number. Let me say Mildred 86, something like this. You can have a number. You can have underscore. You can have this within the name, but not in front of the name, not the first character of the name. So if I write first name like this, or I write first name like this, or I write first name like this, they're not the same. If I put it in uppercase, they are not the same. The reason is variable names are case sensitive. So if I define my first name this way, it's only going to look for first name defined in camel case like this. If I define it like this, it's only going to look for the one defined in snake case like this snake case, or whatever this is called, or Pascal case like this. if I define my variable with something like first, let's say underscore name, it's only going to look for first name defined like this. So take note of the name. So when you have errors, before you book your one-on-one, just make sure that your cases are exactly what you are calling. You're not calling first name with N in uppercase and then I'm defining first name with N uppercase and then calling it with lowercase. It's not going to work that way. I can also define this like, let's say, let age is equal to, let's say 20. Let's first name equal to Jane. And let last name be equal to Doe. And then let age be equal to 20. So we define variables. Let's say we want to define a constant. I will say let's const let's say country of birth. So why I say the country of birth is a constant is that there is no humanly possible way that the person's country of birth can change. If you are born in, except if you want to lie about it, but in reality, if you are born in the Caribbean, or if you are born in St. Lucia, for instance, you always be born in St. Lucia. That can never change. But country of residence can change, right? So we can define it as a constant and say Algeria, for instance. So this is a constant because the value doesn't change. You don't want the value to be changeable. So this is the logic between using the different kind of keywords to define your variables. So that let or constant. And if you want to make the system Libra, you want to use var. But I don't advise you to use something that might be deprecated in the future and will not have support, and then you have to start rewriting your code. So use what is most recent and most current, let and constant. If you need to support older browsers, you can do that within a loop to check what browser the person is using and decide to use the var keyword for that, and if not, use the other one, so that downgrading or in the future, or if that loses support at some point, you will now be able to easily do your system so that you are able to continue using your system without too much breaking. Okay? Any question? So this is one way of declaring variables. You know, you can do this in a, let's say, let age equal to 20, comma, first name equal to Mildred. So you see things like this where people declare their variables this way. Where people declare their variables this way, like one declaration as a comma separated list, using one let statement. If you want to just have one line of code for that. And let's see if this works before we move. Let's say document dot get element by ID paragraph 2 dot inner HTML is equal to so this is not going to be quoted because we are calling a variable. Let's say we're calling first name. So once you declare the variable, you just start using that variable name everywhere. So every time you need to make a change, you only need to change the value of first name, and it changes everywhere on your page that uses that name. So let's say we have 50 lines of code that uses first name, and if in each of those lines we just hard code the first name, when it's time to change, we have to look for each of those lines. So one of the advantage of defining variable is you only need to change it in one place and it applies throughout the page. So this is the advantage. So I'll refresh this and I have first name printed out to the page because I asked it to print out first name. Okay, and then I'll print age. So it's the same thing. Like if I uncomment this and I comment this out and I refresh, it's still going to be the same. The first name here is Jane, so it's going to work with that. So whichever way you do it, as a comma separated list using one declaration or declare each one individually, it's still going to work. Okay. When we want to redeclare a variable, let's say we have the first name to be Jane, and I want to redeclare this to say let the age be 20 and let the first name be Mildred. This is not going to work because the let keyword does not allow us to redeclare. And when I refresh, the page will be blank. How do we look at what the error is? We go to our developer tool, and then we'll look at the console, and we'll see concord syntax error identifier age has already been declared. So this is how your error will look like. We will start doing error handling like using a try-catch block. You'll begin to see exactly why. Give us the line number, line 20, which is this line is a problematic line of code. So this is how you read your error, and you'll be able to see exactly what's happened, why your screen is blank. Your screen is blank. Sometimes you try to debug these things, you won't find out what the reason is. If you don't go to your console, there's no way you can know where the error is because it doesn't display any error on the screen. So the let keyword does not allow us to redeclare variable. If I come here to redeclare the constant keyword, let's say this is not let now, it will not allow us to redeclare also. So country of birth, and I want to change this now to, let's say, Nigeria. It's going to stop us from redeclaring this, and it's going to give us country of birth has been declared already. So for constant let, you cannot redeclare variable. Let's say this is not constant and this is var. Var is very liberal. Everything is going to go well. So var country of birth, and this is const, so I'll just use var again, country of birth. And it's going to use the last declared country of birth, which is Nigeria. So let me print out the country of birth so we see the one it uses. Then when I refresh this page, it prints the last declared. So var is liberal, it allows you to do anything, write rubbish and it will work. And then it uses the last declaration that the system can find. So it knows it's Algeria here. When it gets here, it has to change it to Nigeria. So that's why the var keyword is so liberal, and that's why there's now a new edition of this starting from 2015. So take note of that. So there's a reason I'm showing you this, so that you can keep to coding standards when you start using this professionally. Okay, so you can't redeclare a variable when you use let and constant. There are other ways of redeclaring variables, or there are other properties of let and using the constant keyword that the var allows you to, but the let does not allow you to. And by the way, I have uploaded a resource, a new resource. So your last resource on the course resource page has a lesson notes for everything that we're discussing today with sample codes. So you can head over to your course resource to get all of that notes. Okay. So let's look at the scope of documents. And when we talk about scope, we mean anything within, I'm going to delete this, anything within curly brace like this. Let's say I define let x is equal to 5. Within this curly brace, JavaScript knows what x is. When I come here to want to use x outside of this curly brace, it does not know what x is. So let's say print x. And then I'll refresh my page, and x is not defined because JavaScript doesn't know what x is. And so this is the scope, starts and end here. So whenever you have a code within curly brace, the scope of the code is within that curly brace. And so we have things like function. When we define a function, let's say function x. So outside of this function, x is not known. So anything that has a curly brace is that is the scope. So it's a block of code. If we go to another curly brace, this is a second block of code. So everything within this block of code is not known in this block of code. It's only known within the block where it is defined. If I put this here, and I refresh, now it knows what 5 is because now it's within the same block. And so this is the whole concept of scope. So when you start writing your code and you get to a point where why is it not displaying, you now check, is it within the scope of the document? But recall again, as liberal as the var keyword is, this is going to be outside, and var is going to see it because it has global scope by default. The let and the constant has block scope. A block of code is any code within curly braces, one block of code. Var is a global scope, which means that throughout the document, you can find this. And it's hoisted, which means that if you use a var keyword, it knows where to find it, either before or after. The var keyword will always find the document on the page. But the let and the constant will not find it. It wants the whatever you're writing to exist before it. So it does not have any knowledge of whatever. You can't use it before you declare it. That's the summary. But you can use anything with the var keyword before it is declared. So when I save this and I refresh, the var keyword is still going to print 5. Let's change x to 10 because it knows it has global scope. So even if it's within a block, it is going to find it wherever it is. So that is why the var keyword is liberal. And that is why you should not use it except you are supporting other browsers. Okay. So the major difference now between the let and the constant and the var keyword is that both the let and the constant are very similar, except for the fact that you cannot assign anything with the constant keyword. But you can, the let keyword can be, it's a little more liberal than the constant. They only have one difference between them. So the let and the constant, both of them have the block scope that we just defined. Both of them, you can't redeclare them once they have been declared. And when we get to events and we use the this keyword, we can't bind anything defined with the let and the const to the this keyword. And when we use the constant now, we cannot reassign any variable that is declared. So the difference between the let and the constant is that for constant you can reassign variables, while for let you can. Okay. So, but when we get to arrays and objects, you cannot reassign, but then you can now change the elements in those arrays defined with the constant or objects defined with the constant. And we're going to look at that as we go along. So we can either illustrate that we cannot redeclare constants, or we just did that previously, so we can just skip that. So now we've looked at how to declare variables and what they hold. We have data types in JavaScript, and we have not discussed the data type. Maybe we'll do that last for today. Let's first of all look at the arithmetic operators, because that is what we've been using. We use equal sign to assign a value to a variable in JavaScript. Equal sign is an assignment operator in JavaScript. It does not mean, so when we use equal sign, we assign a value to a variable. When we want to check what x hold, we use equal to. So if we have if statements, we want to check if x is equal to 10, we use equal to. And we use equal to, we assign this value to this variable. Okay? So when we get to that, you will know every time we use equal, x is equal to 10. So if we have an if statement and we want to check if the value of x is 10, we can say if x is equal to 10. And say if x is equal to 10 like this. We'll go to that part when we get there. So we have the equal as an assignment operator. We also have the plus sign that we use to add two numbers. If it is a number, if it is a string, it's going to concatenate them. So let's say, for instance, I have, I'll remove the block so we can just work smoothly. Let's say let first name be equal to Jane. Let last name be equal to Doe. And then I want to print to the inner HTML with paragraph 2, first name plus last name. Now these are strings. Strings are within single or double quotes. So every time you have anything, any text at all, sentence, paragraph, they must be within single or double quotes. And those are called strings. So let's use single quotes to see this. So you can use single or double quotes. It's not just double quotes that can be used, and these are strings. So if I print this, there'll be no space. It won't be formatted. It will print Jane Doe together on the page. So I'll refresh, and I don't have it printed out. Let's see why. So I'm printing out first name plus last name. So let's say let full name. And the reason is not printed out. Instead of doing this, let's just look at the reason. I don't want to do that. It's because the name, last name, is not the same as this. It's case sensitive. So this is going to be uppercase N. And let's see that. And it's printed Jane Doe. If we want to format this, we can print a space. We'll say plus, space, plus, last name. And then we'll get a space between them like that. Okay? Or if we don't want to do this whole formatting, we just want to have a plus. You want to leave a space in front of this, and it will still print with a space like that. Okay, so when it's two numbers, it is going to add the numbers together. So if I say first name is equal to, let's just do something, 1, and last name is equal to 3, the plus is going to add them together to give us 4. If we have a number and a string, it's going to concatenate them again like that. If we have a string in double quotes, it's going to see what it's going to do. We're going to have 15 printed because it's concatenating them. So your numbers must not be quoted. If it's quoted, it's going to concatenate it. You look at this as a string, I need to do that. And for those of you who have done Python, Edmond, you find that if it's Python, Python will just assume that this is a number and add them together. But JavaScript will not. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the difference between languages. But for JavaScript, it's a little stricter, a little more complex, and a little frustrating for most people, I know. So those are the key syntax you need to write down, especially when you are learning more than one language at a time, for you to easily know the difference between the syntax of the two languages that you learn all at once. So let's try to look at the different types of operators that we commonly use and what they print out to the page. So I'll say let's do addition example, we'll do subtraction and all that. So say let's add example be equal to let's say 5.4 plus 3.3. Let subtraction example be equal to 5 minus 3. Let's do something we call multiplication, and we use an asterisk in multiplication. So I'll just write let multi example be equal to, let's say we want to multiply 2 by 3, we expect to get 6, and we use asterisk sign to do multiplication in JavaScript. And let's say let division, we use the forward slash for division in JavaScript, and we say is equal to, let's say 10 divided by 2. And then there is sometimes that we need a modulo operator. The modulo operator uses the percent sign, and what it does is, like we said, 10 divided by 2, right? It will give us 5 when we divide. But modulo will not give us what we get from the division. It's going to give us the remainder of that division. So let's say, for instance, let modulo, so I'll put mod example be equal to, let's say 5 modulo 2. Let's do something that will have a remainder. So which means that when we divide 5 by 2, it's going to be 2 remainder 1. So we expect this to print out 1 to the screen because, so print 1. Let's see what we expect, and so we'll make sure that it's working well. Print 5. This is going to print 6. This is going to print 3. And mathematicians, what will this print? Print 8.7. Is that what it prints? Let's see.
Yes.
Okay. So we have exponentiation, which is when we want to have something like the square root of something, the cube root of something, all those raised to the power of things, exponentials. So let's say x example, and we'll say this is like 2 raised to the power of 3. We expect this to print 8. Let me play it safe and use numbers that I know the answers. And then we have something we call the increment and the decrement operators, and we'll use these two a lot. So increment operator, let's say we want to say when you subtract 2 from 5, it's supposed to be 3. We don't want 3 to be printed. We want it to increment the answer by 1. So I can say subtraction example plus plus, which means it will add 1 to it. So we'll do decrement, and we use this in loop. For instance, when you say the length of your array is 10, or the length of the number of people is 10, and you want to say you want to print out each person's name from that list of people, and you only want to print that out from the beginning to the end. And so you can now do something like a loop where you say you use something like a what do they call them, to loop through. So use I like an iterator, and you say if I, or for I is less than the total number of, or the length of the array, you want to print out I, then increment I plus plus, things like that. So let's use the addition example for this one. So let's say add example minus minus. So we expect this to print out. For subtraction, it's going to print out 4. And for the addition to print out 4, right? 3 add 1 to 4. Subtraction is going to print out 7.7. So let's hope all of these are correct. Right? So this is just basic JavaScript, and these are the foundation you need for you to be able to go further. We want to print all of these out. Let's not use inner HTML. Let's just use documents.write for this purpose, so to make it easier. Documents.write, and we want it to write out add example. So we're going to just copy and paste several documents.write for it to write down everything that we have defined. So we have this to be sub-example. We have this to be multi-example. We have this to be VB example. We have this to be mod example. We have this to be exponential example, and this to be increment example, and we have this to be decrement example. So this document.write does not leave a space when it's done. Subtraction prints 3, addition prints 4. Still with multiplication prints 6 correctly, division prints 5, modulo example prints 1 as we expected, exponential prints 8, increments 3, and decrement prints 4. And because addition and subtraction are switching themselves for whatever reason, so let me change the variable name to this add example and sub example. So let's say I will have let addition be equal to 2 plus 2, and we expect this to print 4. And let's say let subtraction be equal to 2 minus 2, and we expect this to print 0. So now we're going to refresh, and we don't have anything printed to the page. We'll go to our console and we'll find out what the problem is. So it's saying sub example is not defined because we use it here and we've not changed it. So we'll change this to addition. So this is the easiest way for you to see what exactly the problem is. And then now we refresh, and it says sub example is not defined. Where do I use it anymore? Oh, here too. So take note of all of these, and then I'll refresh. So let's close this. We're adding, our addition gives us still taking 3 and taking subtraction as 1. And for whatever reason, we don't know why JavaScript has decided to add 2 plus 2 and has given us 1 to it. So let's see if we need to put a space around the operator. Because now these are the kind of errors sometimes you will have, and you will never be able to explain why. You won't get this in your console most of the time when there's no error. So let's look at the console. There's no error, no issues found. Everything looks right. Everything looks like it's working well because there is no error. And so we try to do addition, we try to do subtraction, and both of them are still printing out whatever they want, while every other thing is printing out correctly. So this is something you investigate. Now you see we can have something like let x be equal to 5, right? Let y be equal to 3, like this. And instead of coming here to write 2 times 3, we can say x times y, like the variable that holds the values. When I want to use, when there's 3 here, 3 is y, is going to still do the same thing. And let's say let z be equal to 2. So we're storing this in variables. And so we can come here to now say z minus z. We'll take the values that are there. Or instead of z minus z here, let's do x minus y. So sometimes it's actually better to store the values in a variable and then do your operations on the variable. And let's say here we want to do x plus y, like this. So instead of this value, and then and z is 2, we can put z here, and put z here, and then we can put x here. Replace the values, and let's say let a be 10. So all the values we have used, we declare them in a variable. So say a divided by z. So this is how we can do and replace everything with different names of our variables. And when we refresh, let's see, we're supposed to have, for addition, we're supposed to have x plus y, which is 5 plus 3, which is supposed to give us 8, but it's giving us 7 for whatever reason. We're supposed to also have x minus y, which is supposed to be 5 minus 3, which is supposed to give us 2, but it's giving us 3. So the subtraction is going higher, and the addition is going lower. And I'm now wondering if this might even be another problem, having this increment and decrement operator, which increments it and decrements it before we actually even start. So let me remove increments and decrements, and let's see what our values come. So if not, it's just a browser. So the increments and the decrements is creating the problem, because when it gets here, it tries to increment it before. So now these are unexpected behaviors of JavaScript, where in other languages, you won't have this problem happen, where because you are declaring another variable called increment operator, and we're trying to use the subtraction. Now recall what the keyword for declaring is and the problem that it's going to have. Now we have increment example. It's going to increment the subtraction on, which is what it did not do properly because it was reading this before it actually prints this. So the only reason we will not read that way is if we don't want to read that way, we might want to put the addition and the subtraction that is used to be printed immediately after we have addition here. And you can see that it's printing normally now, correctly, the way it's supposed to print, because it sees the print statement before it sees these increments that changes stuff here. So where we're supposed to get here, the addition x plus y, 5 plus 3 prints 8, it prints the 8 as we want it. Subtraction x minus y, 5 minus 3, is supposed to print 2, and it prints the 2 out like we want it there. So we have other types of operators. You check your course resource and research online to see different other operators and how they are used. We are going to use increments and decrements, and it's going to work by the time we use it because we are going to be testing our values. We have different data types in JavaScript, and the data types we have numbers. Numbers can either be whole number or decimal number, like we've seen. We have strings, which can either be quoted with single or double quotes, like we have. Number can also be like a scientific notation, like we'll have something like let z or let b be equal to a value like 789, and we'll have e minus 5. And we'll know that this is supposed to print out something like, where are the mathematicians here? 1, 2, 3. So 2 decimal place 0.00789. So this is the scientific notation for this, right? So when we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, minus 5. Okay, so we can write it like this. Numbers. So number can be whole, can be decimal, 3.0 like this, or can be like this. When we have something we call Boolean, the value of a Boolean can be true or false. So when we write true, is a Boolean. When we write false, is a Boolean. So that's the data type. We have another data type we call objects, and we define it like this, because we always use a constant to define an object. Let's say persons, and we create objects using curly brace like this. So constant persons is equal to, and we have them in key value pairs. So what the variable name is supposed to be is going to be the key first name. We put a column and we type the first name to be, let's say, Mildred. We also have last name as a comma separated list, and we put this like this. Okay, so this is an object data type. We have something called array. We also use constant to define array, and arrays are defined in square brackets like this. It does not have a key like this. We just specify the values. So let's say constant student, and then we have name, this is the first key, and let's say another key, another name, Jane, another name, Doe. So these are the ways we define arrays, we define objects, and these are all the different data types that we have. But in JavaScript, when we have arrays and objects, all of them are called an object data type. It's not called, when you try to get a type of the data type, array and object and dates will always display as an object on your screen. So if you have a date, we define a date like this. We also use constant for date. If we use let, it will work, but constant is what we use. Equals to new date. And when we have the date, let's say Christmas Day. So this is how we define it. So all of these three, object, array, date, are also objects data types. We have data type undefined when the value is not defined, data type of null where it is null, and we have something called symbol. So these are the data types we have. So let's look at the integer data type, and where that again will bring confusion. We have something like, let's say, let x be equal to, because the integers in JavaScript are stored in 64-bit floating points, like I said earlier. We can always have plus 9 billion minus 9 billion. So we can always store up to 15 digits. After 15 digits, you begin to have unexpected behaviors, things printed out in different ways. The precision will be so off, completely off. So let's say we have something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And let's say let y be equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Now, this is 15 digits, this is 20 digits. We want to print out to the screen. X is equal to plus X. And we want to say document dot write y is equal to plus y. Okay, and when we refresh our page, we'll have x printed out like we want it, but y will begin to round things to zeros and the precision is just off. So we can see what x is printed out and what y has printed out, because in JavaScript, once the digit is more than 15, you begin to have precision issues like this. So what do you do when you are going to go violate the laws of integers? You have to add an n at the end to tell JavaScript that this is a big int, it's above the normal range of 15 digits. And at this point, it will now print it correctly like you want it, the 888, because there's an n at the end. So every time you write a number, and when you are writing your code, and you're writing a number, and the number of digits you are expecting you are doing an arithmetic operation, any evaluation you are doing on your code, and you don't know what to get in advance. If it's more than 15 digits, you want to add an n, or instead of an n, you can just declare this as big int. There is a method or a function called big int like this, and when you have big int like this, it will still print out everything correctly because of the big int. Okay, now you can see how unexpected it is. You have your first 15 correctly, and where 5248 came from is what we don't know. So you can see you still have precision problems, and I put n at the end as my best option because I know there's a big int method, but for some reason, every time I use big int, I always get unexpected behaviors, and I don't know why. So we'll have to investigate that. So it's just about to use an n and get exactly what you're supposed to get at the end. But with big int, I mean, I can't tell what the issue is and why big int to print out what it wants to print out. Okay, so big int again, I said is written big int like this, and then you remove the n, and then we print it out to the page and get unexpected behavior of JavaScript. So take note of all of these behaviors, investigate them to see if there's something we are missing, make notes about it. But I know again that big int cannot actually take decimals. Let's say we put a decimal number here. This shouldn't print out. If it's behaving normally, yeah, it shouldn't print out because big int does not take decimal number. It always have to be integer numbers. So refer to your course resource. We have all of these in your course resource. Try out the codes in the course resource. Make note of all the unexpected behaviors that you encounter and research them to see what we are missing and how you can correct them, and suggest them in the group chat to see this is what you encountered and this is the error. So welcome to programming, especially JavaScript. This is all you'll find in JavaScript. So let's do something that doesn't have unexpected behaviors. Any question? I hear somebody talking.
No question.
Okay, so let's do the last topic that we have, which is functions for today. Now, in JavaScript, we have something we call a function, which is a block of code that we can use over and over and over again. And when we say we want to reuse the code over and over, it means that, let's say, many people are going to log into your site, and you don't want to have to know the people in advance and say, Emmanuel is going to log in, so let me put a greeting message for Emmanuel, and Edmond is going to log in, I'll put a greeting message for Edmond, and Pascalina is going to log in. It's not going to work. So let's have a function that will greet everybody that comes. And in JavaScript, we define a function called greet, like this. Everything has a curly brace. So this is the syntax of function. We'll have function, all lowercase, and the name we want to give our function. We can give it any name. We can give it the name good morning, whatever we want to give our function as a name, we can give it. Okay. There are good naming practices, whether uppercase, lowercase, when you refer to JavaScript documentations. And sometimes, again, when you start working in teams, there'll be coding standard for different teams. At that point, you want to know whether you have a convention that when we name functions, we want to name it in a certain way, camel case and something, just for everybody to be able to follow. So we have this, and all we want this function to do is to use a statement called return. This is the end of the statement. Once JavaScript sees a return statement, it's not going to print anything further in that block. Return means that this is the end of it. I'm returning a value. And what I want it to return is welcome to School of Programming and Software Development. Okay, someone in the chat asks how when the greeting changes. So when we start receiving inputs from users, there's something we call parameters. We're going to look at that shortly. So we're going to try to print this out, and then we're going to look at how to take in parameters. So in the event where you want to have custom messages for different people, it's going to be part of the argument, which is going to look at the logged in user, passes it as an argument, and then displays greet return. So instead of this, is going to return hello and whatever the argument is passed into this as a parameter. Okay, whatever parameter is passed to argument. So when we say parameter, we mean what is defined. So x is a parameter in the function definition. When we call x, when we call greet and we supply x, x now becomes an argument outside of the function definition. So sometimes we use argument, parameter interchangeably, but it's just similar. The parameter is when it's in the function definition. An argument is when we call the function and we supply what the argument wants. Okay, so we have this. We want to print this out to the page. We want to print out welcome to School of Programming. So it's returning this. So how do we call this? Let's use document.getElement by ID. So that event, we are going to look at it when we look at forms, getting form values. So when there is a value entered into the form, maybe it collects a user input, we want to get that value and pass it in as an argument. So we're going to revisit functions when we do that later on in the course, maybe week 19 or thereabouts, and then you will see how to display something based on the argument. Okay? And so the elements with the ID of, let's use paragraph 1, but inner HTML is equal to, now we're calling a function. You just call the function name and a pair of parentheses like this, because it's empty, the same way it is defined. When we refresh our page, we should have welcome to School of Programming and Software Development printed, because we just called it and it has given us the return value. If we call this without the parentheses, you get the whole function definition printed to the page like this. So when you begin to get something like this, it means that you are missing something, which is the pair of parentheses. So this is a basic function which doesn't take any argument. Now, for those of you that will still go through internship, let's say we are designing a form, and the form has maybe it's a form that collects patients' vital signs in the hospital, and you don't want to have fixed values, like you measure the height in centimeter. You want JavaScript, when an event happens, like you leave the screen or you try to submit the form, it should automatically so you can have an on-click event that says when the person leaves this height field that is measured in centimeter, automatically convert it into meter and display it on the screen. So in the events that different nurses or different people doing the triage are using different values or different units, like some countries will measure weight in kilograms, some in pounds. You want the system to automatically give the second value when one value is entered. So you don't want the person to sit down and calculate, oh, the weight is 70 kg, how do I convert this to pounds? You want the JavaScript to do that automatically. Once any of the values entered, you want the second conversion unit to happen. That is where function becomes very interesting. And this time we want to take arguments. Let's give an example that is not similar to what I have said, but that will be a practical example in the JavaScript course, where we have a function. And let's say this function is going to be a function that defines the area of a triangle, right? And this is going to take parameters. When you define an area of a triangle, the formula is half times base times height, right? So the area of the triangle, let me write that here, is half times base times height. I think so. And there's a parenthesis here, which means base times height comes first, the order of precedence. So the order of precedence that we're talking about in arithmetic operation is anything in parentheses should come first. And then anything with exponentiation has the second order. So let's say there's no parenthesis here, and the system sees this. It's going to evaluate this first because it has exponentiation. It is of a higher order. So subtraction and addition have the same precedence, but they come after multiplication and division, which have the same precedence and come after exponentiation. There are other operators that come that, but this is the order of precedence of the most commonly used ones, or the ones we are going to use. So when you see the brackets, know that whatever is in the bracket is going to be evaluated first, and when we have exponentiation next, multiplication and division next, addition and subtraction next. Okay, so the formula for the finding the area of a triangle is half times base times height, which means that we need to get the user to supply the base to us, and we want the user to supply the height. So you can have as many arguments as you need, or as many parameters as you need. So the user will supply all of those arguments that are exactly the same number of the arguments you have supplied. So the user has to give us the base and the height. And when the user supplies this, we want to return our half, 1/2 times, I'll put this here, the base the user supplied times the height. So it is the same thing you use to do things like you want to convert from Celsius to Fahrenheit. You have the formula for conversion of things from Fahrenheit to Celsius. You find the formula and then you plug it there. So maybe at this time when we say to Celsius, you provide the Fahrenheit value here, and then you plug it into the formula and return that value like that. So let's say we want to find the area of a triangle whose base is 10 and the height is 24. Let me say the one that I can calculate the value in my head to give us 120, right? So I'll call area triangle here. And this time, because the parameters are base and height, I will supply the argument in the same order. The first argument is going to be the base. The base of my triangle is 10, the height is 24. So every time I have a function like this, I call the function the number of parameters in the order to supply the number of arguments in the order. And if you're doing Python, you know we have something like named arguments, where you can name the arguments so that you don't have a mistake of the order of on which you specify them here. And so let's refresh and hope we get 120 printed. Yes, and so this calculates the area of a triangle. So if you have something like you're creating a custom calculator or something on the student's page, and you want them to be able to have like an automatic page that does conversions. Let's say you have a little app that has basic. So you're designing something for a school, for instance, you're a grade 5 teacher, and you're going to be doing all of these courses, and you want to give electronic assignments or something. You want them to be able to do the calculation, guess the answer, and you have something like a game, an educational game, so that it will say when it's correct or not correct. You can design something like this using functions, and then just call the function when the user types something. You want that thing to be the argument here, and returns the answer of what the person typed. If it's correct, it checks correct. So these are the use case of functions. They're very powerful, and you need to understand them. So any question? So the function is always defined with a function keyword, written function in lowercase, and then you give a name to your function, whatever name you want. And then a pair of parentheses, you supply parameters if you want your function to have parameters to work on, or you leave it blank and just put a pair of parentheses and then a pair of curly braces, and your function definition comes within your curly braces. And then you return half times base times height. You can do something redundant to say x is equal to half times base times height, and then you return x. That doesn't make sense. You can just return the thing directly. So when people just start programming initially, and they want to be careful and write out all their code, then by the time you start becoming an expert, you know you can just combine things and don't do things so much unnecessarily on the page. So this is the same thing like we did previously to get 120. Okay, so I guess we should end today's lesson here, because if you get too much knowledge in one day, you're just going to mix up everything. And so in the next lesson, we'll try to look at other topics that I discussed in week 16 and 17. Maybe we should do that on Thursday. Anybody available for Thursday? I know it's Christmas weekend.
I'm available
for Thursday. Okay. So we'll use the normal class link, the normal link scheduled for Thursday at the same time, and then we catch up with the other topics. So I don't know if this is beneficial to anyone or it helped your questions and your problems. Is it beneficial?
Yes, it's very beneficial.
Yes.
All right. So have a nice day, and we'll see you on Thursday. I will send the recording as soon as I get it.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.